Advisory Committee for the Municipality of the County of Kings for Tuesday, May 9th. My name is Martha Armstrong. I'm the Chair, Council for District 4. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We're going to have roll call. We will be using our voting systems and today. So our clerk will turn on the voting for roll call here in a moment. I just wanted to welcome Deputy Mayor Emily Lutz, who is assuming the seat vacated by Councillor Windsor's resignation, and a little farther down in the agenda, since Councillor Windsor was the vice chair, we will be filling that position. So in the meantime, we'll get set up for roll call, please. All are present with the exception of our citizen member, Mr. Logan Morris, and he sent his regrets to me earlier this morning. So we'll move on. We have an agenda before us. Are there any amendments or additions to this agenda from any of the members? Nothing? Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion for approval. Ms. Gagnon, Councillor Allen, thank you. All those in favor? Please register your vote. We do have a 10-second delay while we wait for those results. But at this time, based on what I assume will be an approval, it's the time for any of the members to declare any conflict of interest they may have with the one item that we have on our agenda today. Nothing? Great. So you are also in possession of the minutes from our April the 17th, 2023 meeting. If there's no errors or omissions that you'd like to bring forward, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Ms. Friars, thank you. Councillor Allen, thank you. I know, I got to turn my head the other way. I'll get to you in a minute. All those in favor, please register your vote. And is there any business arising from those minutes? Nothing? Great. So this is the point where we will entertain nominations for the election of the vice chair. Councillor Allen?
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Granger.
Do you accept that nomination, Councillor Granger? Oh, seconded by Councillor Killam. Thank you. Do you accept the nomination? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? And one last time, any further nominations? No? Congratulations. You're buying. Okay. Our one and only item on our agenda today is an application to enter into a development agreement to permit a comprehensive neighborhood development in Port Williams. And our presenter is Ms. Mosier. Your light is on, and it's...
Thank you. So as the chair said, we are here for a development agreement for a comprehensive neighborhood development. So this is an R5 development. Oh. Here we go. I've got the right screen open now. So the proposal as we received it was for a comprehensive neighborhood development consisting of 3 multi-unit dwellings, each containing 67 units, 1 2-unit dwelling, a neighborhood commercial use, and an existing 1-unit dwelling. This is currently occupied by the owners of the subject properties. The subject properties are in Port Williams. There are 4 different parcels associated with this application. The 2 to the rear, these 2 larger ones, are a former sand quarry, as you can see back here. This one right here at 1207 Belcher Street is the existing 1-unit dwelling that's occupied by the owners. And then the 4th is this narrow parcel that provides access to the rear. The total area is just over 12 acres and 825 feet of road frontage. You can see that most of it is forested at this time, with the exception of the former quarry, and much of the vegetation is proposed to remain. This is an aerial photo of the subject properties taken at a bit of a bird's eye view. Through this photo, you can really see the change in elevation of the subject properties, with the existing one-unit dwelling property being the high point, and the rest of the land sloping downward as you move away from the one-unit dwelling. It also slopes slightly downward along the road as well. The broader surrounding area, you can see, is made up of primarily residential uses in the immediate vicinity and along Belcher Street, but also some significant agricultural activity occurs to the west as well as to the south towards the Cornwallis River. And sort of 2 properties over is the Port Williams Elementary School. And we do see a fairly large agricultural operation on the other side of the street. All of this agricultural activity is completely logical because it's all located outside the growth center. So the orange line is the boundary of the growth center, and the areas surrounding it are the rural area. And all of these lands are generally zoned A1 or O1 down by the river. It's environmental constraints. The zoning along Belcher, however, shows, maybe you can't see that very well, but the yellow tone is the R3 zone, so our residential mixed density zone, which permits all manner of residential units, including multi-unit dwellings containing up to 8 units per dwelling. Multiple main dwellings are permitted in R3 as well, so we could see a significant increase in density in the long term along Belcher Street. Just by way of reminder, what is a development agreement? A development agreement is a contract between the municipality and a landowner that enables a landowner to pursue a development that's not otherwise permitted in the land use bylaw, or is a comprehensive neighborhood development such as this. These do have a special standing under the Municipal Government Act, but the development agreement process is the same. The development agreement runs with the land, so if the land is sold, the new owners have access to all of the new permissions and restrictions contained within that development agreement. The ability to enter into a development agreement needs to be stated in the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw under the Municipal Government Act. The municipal planning strategy is required to provide criteria that council can use to assess the merits of the proposal. This application was received in early 2022. We did hold a virtual public information meeting as a result of COVID-19 health restrictions. The video was posted in March of 2022, and we did receive a few comments from the public. We did receive a letter from a neighboring farmer indicating that he had concerns around traffic as a result of this proposal. If you are not familiar with this stretch of Belcher Street, as a result of there's a significant change in the posted speed limit on Belcher Street, as it is the edge of the growth center. So you hit the edge of the growth center and the speed limit goes down from 80 to 50. And then in quick succession, it goes down to 30 as a result of the school zone. So there can be traffic slowdown just as a result of the existing conditions along Belcher Street. And the farmer did express concerns with regards to that condition, as well as the agricultural activity, which can lead to large farm equipment moving at slow speeds along Belcher. Another neighbor was concerned also around traffic, but they also expressed concern around the destruction of barn swallow habitat. Staff did consult with the Department of Environment in this regard, who did attend the site and indicated that they did not see any evidence of prior or current nesting. Our enabling policy for this application are policies 3.1.13 and 3.1.14, which pertain entirely to developments within the Comprehensive Neighborhood Development, or R5 zone. And I will take policy 3.1.14 first, and then we'll go over 13 after, and you'll see why. Policy 3.1.14 states that council shall consider including lands outside the R5 zone, so the current existing one-unit dwelling, along with that skinny little strip right beside, they are still within the residential mixed density, or R3 zone, so this policy contemplates their addition under the development agreement, with the criteria being that the lands abut the R5 zone, which these do, we've gone over that in the map, and that they demonstrably contribute to protecting natural features, improving transportation linkages, or facilitating the development of isolated properties. And in this regard, the long and skinny parcel does provide access to the rear, but that parcel is only 30 feet wide, which may result in some restrictions in terms of where that driveway ultimately can go in accordance with the Department of Public Works. So we've included the one-unit dwelling to enable that driveway to potentially move if necessary. Policy 3.1.13 states that council shall only consider by development agreement proposals for comprehensively planned developments within the R5 zone, and they shall be satisfied that it meets all of these criteria. So the first is that it consists of land uses that are consistent with the residential designation. This can include all forms of housing, as well as community facilities and neighborhood commercial uses. B states that a mix of housing options rather than only one building type shall be provided. So the proposal included 3 different types of housing: multi-unit dwellings, a 2-unit dwelling, and a 1-unit dwelling. We have enabled additional building forms in this development agreement. I will go over the general terms of the development agreement a bit later, but we have enabled all building types in an effort to maintain some flexibility for the proponents. C states that council shall be satisfied that the development has an overall minimum density of 4 units per acre when serviced by central sewer and water, which this is. So at the moment, there is not sewer service provided to the property, but given this property's location on the very edge of the growth center, that's not completely unexpected. There hasn't been a whole lot of demand for development on this stretch, certainly not for higher density development that really truly benefits from sewer servicing. But in the fullness of time, we do expect that to occur. So while the sewer service is not there now, there are discussions between the applicants and the village, the owner of the sewer system, to come to an agreement that would extend some form of sewer service to the subject properties. But with regards to the density, the proposed density was just under 17 units per acre. We've written into the development agreement that a minimum of 10 units per acre is required. And the magic behind the 10 units per acre is that this is the as-of-right density that can occur in the residential 1-unit zone. So this is our lowest form of as-of-right development, and that's where we've pegged this minimum density for this site, although additional density is permitted. Council's meant to be satisfied that there's a neutral or positive long-term impact on municipal finances. And we did do a little bit of a financial analysis for this application, but unlike some of our other R5s, we haven't gone into great detail with regards to the costs, simply because this proposal does not propose any new roads. Typically, with new roads, that's when you get new sewer infrastructure, new water infrastructure. That's when the costs associated with development are seen. But where this does not have any new roads, and therefore no new public infrastructure, we've only looked at the revenues. And in terms of the revenue, on the basis of comparables, the manager of finance has determined that this development could provide an increase in $230,000 of tax revenue for the municipality and roughly $90,000 of increased tax revenue for the village, with very few costs. Subsection E states that the development agreement will include appropriate phasing to ensure that no new vacant parcels are created. Where these subject properties are located to the rear of existing development and are on the edge of the growth center, the development of these parcels, regardless of the order in which they are developed, will not result in the creation of vacant parcels. So we are of the opinion that this criteria has been met. Council is meant to be satisfied that the proposal results in public infrastructure that is efficient to service and maintain. And as I stated before, there is no new infrastructure that's being extended as a result of this. So we do believe that certainly the existing infrastructure will continue to be efficient to service and maintain, and we'll likely see an increase in that efficiency. Criteria G states that the proposal will encourage active transportation by providing sufficient sidewalks, pathways, and/or trails. Belcher Street does not currently have a sidewalk in this location. The sidewalk currently ends at the elementary school. Notwithstanding, we have required that all vehicular accesses, so all driveways, have an associated pedestrian walkway that meets accessibility standards, in the hopes that when the village does extend the sidewalk, the proposed development will be ready to connect into that infrastructure. Meant to ensure that the proposal minimizes environmental impact by protecting sensitive natural features and incorporating low-impact approaches for managing stormwater. So the applicant has indicated that much of the vegetation will remain. That is contained in the site plan. But also we have required within the development agreement the submission of a drainage plan at the time of permitting that incorporates low-impact approaches to manage stormwater. Criterion I indicates that a 100-foot wide vegetative buffer between the R5 and an A1 zone is required. The buffer area must be contained within the development and may be used for recreation or service purposes, but cannot contain any buildings. So we have required a 100-foot buffer between the western property line where it abuts the A1 and the a 100-foot separation distance between the western property line and the balance of the development. There is a walking trail proposed to be within this area, and the underground parking structures are permitted to extend within this area. But the purpose of this buffer, and I will go over the Port William secondary plan, which is where this policy comes from. That policy provides a bit more background in terms of what the purpose of this buffer is meant to do. The Port William secondary plan indicates that this 100-foot buffer is meant to provide a separation between agricultural impacts and the proposed development. So, and the purpose of it being vegetated is to stop the proliferation of pesticide and fertilizer spraying. But the area to the west, the immediate west of the subject properties, is not in active farming and has not been. So we've not required that that portion be vegetated, aside from what has been indicated on the site plan stating that the vegetation is to remain. But we have not written that requirement into the development agreement. Criterion J indicates that a 10% open space contribution will be required at the time of subdivision, and the development agreement does reflect this. The contribution can be either land or cash. That would be negotiated at the time of subdivision between staff and the applicant. K indicates that the proposal can use alternative road, lot servicing, or other infrastructure standards, but this is not applicable since there are no new roads proposed. L indicates that sufficient vehicle and pedestrian transportation linkages are provided within any adjacent town, village, or property. And as I stated, there is a requirement for pedestrian walkways along all vehicular accesses. M indicates that the proposed development will complement existing and planned development within an adjacent town or village. And we're not aware of any significant other planned development in the area at this time. And we're meant to be satisfied, or council is meant to be satisfied, that the proposal meets the general development agreement criteria. And I'm going to do that at the very end because that policy is also contained within the Port Williams secondary plan, so we'll go over it once. In terms of other MPS policies to support this development, when we look to our vision goals and objectives, we find under settlement for our vision that we're meant to concentrate new commercial and residential development, including mixed uses in our growth centers, in order to encourage efficient service delivery and to enable and encourage a diversity of housing throughout the region. So this proposal would increase the diversity of housing within Port Williams. There are not currently a significant number of multi-unit dwellings in Port Williams, so this would provide an increase in that mix. Our growth center objectives for transportation indicate that we're meant to promote the development of compact, complete communities with accessible and active transportation options. So as much as possible, this proposal is providing active transportation options, and it does provide an increase in the types of housing within the overall community, and does also provide a neighborhood commercial use to serve the surrounding area. Within our residential objectives, we're meant to accommodate a wide range of housing options, including opportunities for mixed uses and increased densities in areas where urban services are efficient to deliver. And that is describing our growth centers, where we do provide increased densities and provide for a mix of uses. And this site would increase both of those on a site-by-site basis. And we're meant to provide a range of housing choices, including affordable housing. So Port Williams does have a secondary plan. It does predate our municipal planning strategy. So I am probably going to go through this fairly quickly just because our R5 policies were written on the basis, we kind of stole a little bit from the Port Williams secondary plan when we drafted those policies. So there is a lot of similarity, but there are a few differences. So we'll go over that as well. But the first policy that we come across within the Port Williams secondary plan is that council shall require all new development within the growth center to be serviced by central water and sewer services. So I did indicate that the subject properties are not currently served by sewer services, but those are expected to be extended, and those arrangements are being made between the village and the applicant at this time. We see within the secondary plan a residential goal of accommodating residential growth that meets the needs of residents from all stages and ages of life. And the provision of multi-unit residential units is really important, specifically for the all ages and stages portion of this, because those are the types of housing that are accessed by folks starting out and they're in adulthood, I suppose, their first home away from home. And it's also the place where people tend to downsize. So providing this type of unit within Port Williams will provide the residents with additional housing options as they age. Our residential objective indicates that we're meant to direct higher density developments to central locations. And I know what you're thinking. This is right on the edge of the growth center. How is this central? Well, this is the core of Port Williams. Our north-south street here is Highway 358. We see Belcher Street come in right along the river, and then this is High Street, and it turns into Stars Point Road. So I would sort of think of this as the core of Port Williams. And we can see on this map a lot of little gray circles. All of those gray circles are civic addresses. That means that there's a building on that property. There is not a lot of vacant land within the core of Port Williams. And if you've driven through Port Williams recently, you will likely have noticed along Highway 358 that the buildings sometimes are older, but overall there is a very high level of maintenance and repair on properties in the core of Port Williams. All this to say that in the fullness of time, this area may get redeveloped with higher density uses, but at this point, to propose a development such as this one within the core of Port Williams would require significant land assembly and the destruction of many buildings that are still well within their lifespan. So in balancing all of the other policies, as well as our housing crisis, staff are of the opinion that while the density is not directed to the core, that this R5 property is appropriate for this level of development. So Port Williams was ahead of the curve with a comprehensive neighborhood development zone. This used to be our R10 zone, but we have turned it into the R5 zone with the adoption of our new planning documents. And as you're aware, we have applied this more broadly across the municipality. But the Port Williams secondary plan still stands, so these policies are still, we still need to address these policies through this application. So the criteria contained within the Port Williams secondary plan is that the density will be a minimum of 4 units per acre, and we've already met that. The development of the area shall be phased in such a way to allow the largest amount of agricultural land to remain in production for as long as possible. These properties were not in agricultural production, so this policy does not apply. C, that a separation distance of 100 feet shall be maintained between any residential building and land actively used for crop land, and 600 feet shall be maintained between any residential building and land used for intensive livestock operations. So we did go over that there is a fairly large farming operation on the other side of Belcher Street. The area outlined in yellow is the closest bit of land that is used for cropland, and that is more than 250 feet away from any new development proposed by this development agreement. And the building outlined in black, it's a little hard to see, it's up here. This is the closest building that could reasonably be used for livestock. I don't know if it is used for livestock, but it's the closest building, and it is over 650 feet away. So staff are of the opinion that this criteria has been met. D, any required vegetative buffer shall include plant material that will grow to an approximate height of 20 feet or more in order to minimize the spread of fertilizer, pesticides, and other sprays. So I did go over this, and the area directly to the west is not under agricultural cultivation, and there is existing vegetation there. So staff are confident that this has been met. E does not apply because it's related to a potential development on Collins Road, so that's not applicable at this time. Subsection F states that higher density areas are centrally located, while lower density areas are located towards the growth center fringe. We did cover this off in terms of where density reasonably can go in Port Williams at this time. And G, that the proposed design and maintenance adequately protect any identified well fields. This proposal is not located within the Port Williams Wellfield Protection Overlay, so this does not apply. Subsection H relates to the dedication of open space through a subdivision, and this set of policies is somewhat complicated, to be perfectly honest, and we have just covered off with a 10% contribution, and that is negotiated. This goes into various ratios of open space to be dedicated, and staff are not of the opinion that these are as relevant as a 10% contribution. In addition to any other information required, developers shall prepare a groundwater study for proposals located within wellfield zones A and B, but again, we're not in A or B, so this does not apply. And we're meant to be satisfied that the general development criteria have been met. So policy 5.3.7 indicates that the proposal is meant to be in keeping with the intent of the MPS, which we've reviewed. It is. That the financial impact on the municipality is not negative, and we have reviewed that it would not be. Staff are of the opinion that as a result of the surrounding land uses being primarily residential in nature as well as the proposed development, that there would be no land use compatibility issues. The adequacy and proximity of school, recreation, and community facilities. So the Port Williams Elementary School is just right down the street from here. Staff did consult with the Annapolis Valley Regional Center for Education on the generation of new students as a result of this development, and they did indicate that while the elementary school is nearing capacity, that they are confident that they will be able to accommodate any new students. The creation of traffic hazards or congestion. Staff did request a traffic study from the applicants, and this was provided to the Department of Public Works for review and approval, and they did indicate that they indicated that they did not have any concerns. There was a left turn lane proposed or recommended through the traffic study for Belcher Street going northbound on Highway 358, but that would be up to the Department of Public Works to implement and install when necessary. Council is meant to be confident that there is adequate fire protection, and staff did consult with the Port Williams Fire Chief, and they did not indicate that there would be any issues providing service to these subject properties. The adequacy of water and sewer services. Staff did consult with the village on both the water and sewer system capacity, and it was indicated that there were no capacity issues for either service. The potential for flooding or serious drainage problems. So a drainage plan will be required at the time of permitting, but staff do not believe that this development has a potential for flooding or serious drainage problems. There are no well fields in proximity to the subject properties, so there are no expected negative impacts on well fields or other groundwater supplies. Staff do not believe that the proposal will cause any pollution resulting from soil erosion or the siltation of watercourses. However, it has been written into the development agreement that the proponents are required to follow the province's guidelines in this regard. And the subject property is not near a lake, so we do not expect there to be negative impacts on lake water quality. And the site is suitable in terms of grade, soil, geological conditions, the location of water courses, marshes, bogs, swamps, and proximity to utility rights-of-ways. So when we take a look at, this is the site plan. This was supposed to just pop up. The site is designed such that there is a driveway access along this portion, along the eastern portion, and that would go to the area of development which would occur to the rear in the former sand quarry. There is another driveway proposed on the western side, and this is where the neighborhood commercial use would be located along Belcher Street. The DA does permit, let me see if I can move this. I can't. The development agreement does permit up to 210 residential units within any combination of formats, including up to a multi-unit dwelling containing 70 units. So instead of being overly prescriptive, as we have in the past, we've used the applicant's proposal as an upper limit, and anything below that can be developed. So this would provide some flexibility to accommodate any changes in the market, changes in the site, changes in other conditions that may not be foreseeable at this time, but staff are comfortable with the proposal, the level of development proposed in the form of 210 residential units, but in terms of the built form, we're not overly concerned that it be in one form or another. Can you just give me one moment and I'll take the site plan off. Okay, that's better. So the commercial component of the proposed development would be required to meet the requirements of the mixed commercial residential zone. It would also be able to be developed with any of the permitted uses within that zone. That is our mixed use zone that is enabled in both residential and commercial designations and permits uses such as retail stores, personal service shops, restaurants, more neighborly focused type commercial uses. We do permit above and below grade parking structures. We have required that all underground parking structures be located a minimum of 30 feet from any lot line. All above grade structures are also required to be a minimum of 30 feet from any lot line, with the exception of the western property boundary, which is required to be 100 feet. And in terms of subdivision, we've enabled subdivision to occur in accordance with the multi-unit or the residential multi-unit or R4 zone. In terms of additional restrictions, again, the 100-foot buffer is required along the western property line. We have required 100 feet of amenity space per residential unit. That can be in the form of private amenity space, so the form of a balcony or a patio, for example, shared interior common space, so an amenity building, or exterior amenity space. A walking trail is proposed on site, but that does not form part of the 100 square feet per residential unit. We have required low-impact stormwater management approaches and a 10% open space dedication. In terms of our process, we are here at Planning Advisory Committee. We did take the application to the Area Advisory Committee last week and did receive a unanimous positive recommendation to this group. Following a recommendation out of this committee, we will take this to council for initial consideration, public hearing, and final consideration. We did notify property owners within 500 feet and will also notify of any public hearing. And with that, I'll put the recommendation up on the board and I'll read it into the record, stating that Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Municipal Council give initial consideration to and hold a public hearing regarding entering into a development agreement to permit a comprehensive neighborhood development at 1207 Belcher Street and associated properties, PID 55030092, 555-23153, 555-34978, and 550-37915, which is substantively the same, save for minor differences in form, as the draft set out in Appendix D of the report dated May 3rd, 2023. And I pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mosier. At this time, I'll open it up for questions of clarification to staff. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that, Laura. Just wanted to ask, because it's a sand quarry, does that make any difference on how the development goes?
Oh, I didn't turn you off. You turned you off.
Sorry, I did turn it off. I should have kept it on. Those would be considerations, but they would be considered at the time of permitting. So that type of consideration would be covered off by the building code in terms of the engineered design for that type of soil and other site conditions.
And does that affect any drainage or wetlands if they are around?
So there's no, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Granger, there are no wetlands in proximity to this or to the subject property, maybe down on the dikes, but that is a significant elevation change. But any drainage concerns would be addressed at the time of permitting as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Killam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a few questions. I think this is a good development. Don't get me wrong here, but I had a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, regarding the trees that are on the property, was it indicated that they're going to leave as many trees as possible for the development?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Killam, I don't think I said that. The applicants have indicated that a lot of the vegetation is to be retained, and they have indicated that on the site plan that they've submitted, but other than indicating that the development shall occur in general conformance with the site plan, we've not required that those trees be maintained. Few reasons for that. One is trees can become damaged or diseased, and we would not want there to be any restriction on the removal of those.
I just have a concern about overall we're losing our trees on the valley floor and the mountain, and I know everywhere else they're planting trees and trying to increase the growth of forests, and I worry about some of the developments that are possibly happening with respect to clear cutting, and I'm hoping that maybe at some point we can work with the province to have a look at that. Just a concern. regarding the affordability issue on housing, is there any indication as to what the rental costs would be to these units?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Killam, the applicants have not disclosed that.
Okay, and that will come at some point, I take it? Yes.
We don't have any policies speaking to the affordability of housing or requiring affordable housing, but I'm sure the rents will be posted at some point, yes.
Okay, I understand. Flood zone issues regarding Cornwallis River, I guess we are familiar with erosion along the banks. Is there any concern 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road that we'll have maybe the same issues that we have right now in Avonport or Hansport?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Killam, the subject site is significantly higher, so there is quite a steep drop at the rear of the property down to the Cornwallis River. There would need to be some very significant erosion to affect the proposed development, especially given that it is set quite a bit back from the rear property line. So.
I understand. Thank you for that. Just one, let me see, what else have I got here? Oh, does this development will have any impact on other developments that are already in the works with the planning department for Port Williams area? Is there a limit to the amount of development, residential development for Port Williams?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Killam, there would be limiting factors certainly on infrastructure, and we do have one other active application in Port Williams at this time, but we've not received any indication from the village that there are concerns about capacity, even in consideration of both developments. The village is well aware of both active development applications and have not indicated any capacity concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gagnon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. Just to clarify, you mentioned the sewer and the water is not a concern for the municipality. It's the Port Williams with the developer. But from what I understand, there is no sewer going there at this time or water for that level of development. So that would mean that would need to be constructed. Can it just be clarified as to who's going to pay for that construction? I don't know if the properties all the way to the school have water. I would assume the school has water and sewer, so the distance wouldn't be too far. Is that how it works for the water and sewer?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, the property is served by water.
Okay.
The sewer service does end at the school, but that's not that unusual for a significant, like I said, there's not a whole lot of development along Belcher Street, and there is that farming operation on the north side, which is probably the reason why the sewer wasn't extended any further beyond the school. But this is not unusual with development on the edges of growth centers. There may not be full infrastructure build out. If these lands were zoned R2 and this was a residential subdivision, this would be a normal practice. This type of extension of infrastructure is common between utility operators and potential developers. So in this regard, it is a village sewer system, so that is a conversation that has to happen between the applicants and the village. This would not be a conversation the municipality would be taking part in.
Okay, so if I understand, the financing of this would be the village and the developer, or the owner?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, that's entirely between the village and the developer.
Okay, so there would be no cost to the municipality. Okay. And so the other clarification I would just like to understand is regarding the zonings. So this is an R5 zoning, but within the development agreement, we can permit standards, if I understand correctly, that are from the R4 and C3 zoning, even though there is no R4 and C3 zoning within that area. Is that how I understand it?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, yeah, that's correct. We could draft all new standards, but where we've already made the wheels, we're reference the wheels we've already made instead of creating new ones. So we just, if we have a zone that we believe has appropriate lot requirements, setback requirements, subdivision requirements, then we would rather use a zone that's already existing as opposed to creating new regulations.
Okay, and so in that sense, does R5 zoning usually hold a commercial zoning in it, or is that something that could, it doesn't match with all of the other requirements, I guess, from the secondary plan and the municipal planning strategy in terms of putting a C3 zoning in that section at Sutton and Belcher Road?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, the R5 zone does not permit a whole lot of development as of right. It permits agricultural uses and forestry uses, with the understanding that all development within an R5 zone occurs by development agreement. So we are within our rights to establish regulations, either brand new regulations or ones that already exist. And the policy does speak to permitting neighborhood commercial uses. So we feel confident that the proposal is consistent in that regard as well.
Okay, and so in terms of the setbacks with agricultural and buildings, that C3 would still fit within that secondary plan of 100 feet, 600 feet for the commercial aspect?
Through you, Madam Chair, the area identified for the neighborhood commercial was outside the 100-foot buffer.
Okay. Okay, and I have two other questions, Madam Chair. One is in relation to the letter that was sent and that was put in our package. And I was just curious, one of the letters referred to Collin Road's development as a point of reference of what the development could maybe look like. I'm not familiar with what the citizen meant by that. I don't know if the staff knows how different these developments in Collin Roads are to what is being proposed here, and why the citizen would have mentioned that as maybe a type of development that he would be more favorable for. Sorry, I'm not going to put you down. It was in the letter from the agricultural person that.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I had to guess, so we do have another R5 on Collins Road. I assume they're not referring to that one, but the R5 that's currently that we're currently processing is sort of the second stage of an existing development. So the area of Steepleview and Leaside would be within the Collins Road development agreement area, and that's been developed as a bit of a traditional subdivision type development. There are 1 and 2 units. There are some townhouses there, and there is a block that includes a 40-unit apartment building. Actually, it can have 2 40-unit apartment buildings. So I'm not sure how this one is categorically different from that one. They both include significant residential development. So I'm not sure exactly what he means, but from a planning perspective, there's not much difference between the two types of developments.
Okay, I was wondering maybe that was something that was followed through and could elucidate differences. Height might be a concern for the neighborhood, but given that the property slopes, it's probably not as bad. So the last question I just had is just regarding the traffic concerns which have been brought up, and the changes in speed, as what you mentioned seem to be already a concern in that area. Does the municipality staff or council have a role to play as this development happens to work with the provincial government to see about changing the speed limits for that area, or to make it after the fact safer? If this is a concern that can be remedied once the development occurs.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, the speed changes as a result of mainly the school zone. That's how you get a 50 kilometer per hour difference in speed. I don't believe the province would be looking to increase the speed limit.
No, I would think
and I don't know that there's any need to reduce the speed on Belcher Street in advance. That would certainly be something entirely within the province's control. The province did review the traffic study, and they did not indicate that there were any concerns.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are no further questions. I do have a few if the committee would allow. Stop turning your light off, Laura. You're not done yet. I was wondering if I could have a little bit of clarity on what the anticipated community commercial space is going to be. Has there been any indication of what that is?
Through you to you, the applicant may have mentioned a cafe of sorts or a small retail spot.
Okay, great. I just thought sometimes community commercial space means, you know, like a community hall or,
Yeah.
you know, that type of thing. So it's definitely commercial. The other one I had is, as you showed in the bird's eye view of the map, there's the grade lowers coming away from the road. And there's also a reference to below grade parking. So if below grade parking is put in, will that raise the back of the property up to be even with the front of the property? And what happens, the trees are now on the lower level. If you raise everything up, do the trees stay low?
My understanding is that they would be maintaining the existing grade and building into that, not
Okay.
building up.
Because in past applications, we've had an issue with people's perception of what they're going to look like from the height, from the road, how they're going to look from the road. So we would assume that if they're going to be built on the lower grade, they won't be quite as visible.
No,
Quite as visible.
No, they likely won't be, but it's also important to remember that, and I did not indicate this, although I should have, the development agreement does cap the height at 5 stories.
Okay.
And the site does slope away, and so the height will not be that visible from Belcher Street. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a 5-story building is not that tall. It's 1 story over and above what we permit in our R4. And is becoming more and more the standard for multi-unit development, even within rural municipalities. I would just raise, by way of example, the municipality of West Hants, 2 days from now at their planning advisory committee is considering 8-story apartment buildings. So given we have a housing crisis, it's height is a consideration, but I don't think it's the big bad boogeyman that we tend to be afraid of in rural municipalities.
Yeah, and I bring it up not so much for me, but because it has been an issue in the past. And the 100-foot buffer you said was going to be on the west. But I noted, and I'm assuming that it's not being prescribed for the south because of this big drop that you said there is on the south end of that.
It's twofold. One is the drop. The other is the lands to the rear are actually in the O1 zone, not the A1 zone. So the
Okay.
buffer is not required.
Okay, good. I guess that's it for me. So that okay, I generated another question. 2, Ms. Gagnon.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, it is in follow-up to the question you mentioned. So if I understand correctly, the 5-story height of the building, if there's a 2-story parking lot underneath, the 5-story would be as of the top of the 2-story, if you had 2 stories of parking lot underneath, and that would be?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon. Yes, that's correct. Height is measured from the established grade, not the bottom footing of the structure. So if you have something below grade, it does not count towards the height. Similar to a residential basement, doesn't contribute to the height measurement on a house.
And second is regarding, so with this picture in particular, in the site plan, it says vegetation not to be removed and that's written in the development agreement. So if I understand correctly, that would be the vegetation that we sort of see at the bottom portion of the image and a bit to the left as well, right?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's no requirement written into the development agreement that the vegetation stay. It has been shown on the site plan, existing vegetation to remain, but it's not required by the development agreement.
Oh, okay, I thought it was required under development. I'll read it again.
Okay. Is that it, Ms. Gagnon?
Yes, oh, sorry. Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Ms. Friars?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one question I had is around the open space contribution and the kind of, the residential makeup of the proposed development. Is it anticipated that this area will, or this development will, I guess, have the number of amenities that would be sufficient? Should it be targeted towards families, or is it anticipated that the village and municipality would I guess, ensure that there are sufficient amenities for families with children that may be living in this kind of development? Just a question as to how the municipality would want to, I guess, address that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Friars. We don't know who the developer is going to target their units to. So we don't know that they'll be targeted to families, but regardless, we have required the 100 square feet of amenity space per unit to be provided, and that can sort of appear in any sort of form. It could be in the form of an amenity building that provides a meeting room or a party room, or the types of indoor amenities that we tend to find within multi-unit residential developments, or it could include a playground outside for children. It's really about the space, but in terms of matching amenities with the residents, we've decided to leave that up to the developer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gagnon?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, because when I read site map appendix Schedule B of the draft agreement, I see like the line with the buffers and says existing tree buffer to remain, area of non-development, existing tree buffer to remain. So that's what I understand, that these vegetative area will not be developed, like they'll remain.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, the link between the site plan and the text of the development agreement states that development shall be in general conformance with the site plan. So where that line ultimately ends up is a little bit, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. What I had meant when I said we've not written into the development the requirement that the vegetation stay is simply that. We've not written a clause in the development agreement stating that vegetation shown on the site plan to remain must remain. We've not put that clause in there. Partly it's to provide some flexibility. When doing a development of this size, there can be lots of things that come up that are unanticipated, and it's also not unusual in the cases of development. If this were a residential subdivision, it's likely that the developer, the first thing they would do is come in and clear all the land. So it's unfortunate that that happens, but it is a reality of development in our world. And so while it is indicated on the site plan that some vegetation is to remain, there's nothing written into the development agreement requiring that vegetation be replaced should it be removed, or anything along those lines.
Okay, if I may, Madam Chair, in what I understand of Section 2.3, appearance of property in the development agreement, Section D, areas labeled existing tree buffer are not intended to be removed. These areas are not intended for development and shall be permitted to grow naturally. Nothing in this agreement shall prevent the removal of diseased or damaged trees. So that's how I read it in the development. So I understand damaged trees and diseased trees can be removed, but I'm expecting that a good chunk of the trees are going to remain in those areas that have been identified as existing tree buffer. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Councillor Killam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just sort of following up the issue around affordable housing, and maybe it's a subject for another day, but I'd just like to bring it up, that wondering if there's any synergy with respect to developers and the amount of money that I understand to be available to help developers in some of the affordable housing projects. I guess we have a affordable housing crisis, and I'm wondering what's happening out there with helping developers putting together projects that would address this. And I understood that maybe there's monies that would help a developer put these units in place and offer affordable housing for folks that would like to move into these units. Just, it's kind of a out there thing. That,
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Understood. It's something that probably would be better brought up at council if and when it comes to us. Right now, we're just dealing with the planning part of it.
I
So
understand. I just
keep it in the back of your mind for if and when this comes to council, okay?
I'll try. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have no more lights on, so can you put the motion back up, the recommended motion back up, please, Ms. Mosier? And I will attempt to read it again, just so we know where we are. So the motion before us is the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Municipal Council give initial consideration to and hold a public hearing regarding entering into a development agreement to permit a comprehensive neighborhood development at 1207 Belcher Street and associated properties, PID 5503 00092, 555-23153, 555-34978, and 5503-7915, which is substantially the same, save for minor differences in form, as the draft set out in Appendix D of the report dated May 3rd, 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Granger, second by Ms. Gagnon. Is there any debate? Ms. Gagnon.
Madam Chair, so I just want to say I approve of the development, but considering it's on the fringe of the growth center and there's sensitive environment to the, I believe, south, to the back, the bottom part of the development, I just want to put out there that I think keeping as many of the natural vegetation as possible will be key to helping this development have a beautiful and long life in that spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please register your vote now, please. This day's already too long. And that passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is any other business to be brought forward today by the committee staff? Nothing else? I'll open the podium if we have anyone that wishes to make any public comments. There's no one jumping out of their seats. Okay. So I will mention that the date of our next meeting on our agenda is listed as June 14th, but that's a Wednesday. So I'm just checking to make sure that that's not, it is supposed to be June 13th? Okay, unless there's been a change for some other reason. Councillor Killam, you have your light on?
Yes, I just wanted to revisit the business of the forestry and clear cutting, generally speaking, not to this application. I'm in favor of this application. I've been receiving a number of calls regarding that concern of us, not us, but that we're losing our forests and our trees, either through clear cutting or for expanding the agricultural area, which I understand is very important, and I'm all in favor of preserving agricultural land, but I'm also in favor of preserving as many of our forests as we can. And I'm just hoping that at some point we can maybe, we have to talk with the province on those items, because as it's indicated, we have no say over what happens on these developments, if I read this correctly. But I'd just like to say that there is a lot of concern building regarding our loss of trees in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor, Ms. Friars? All those in favor, register. I say in favor. Even if you're against it, register your vote, please. I don't think anybody's against it. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.